speaking of, going all in or all out, the culture warification of all of this is a story that we like to stick to, the ACLU. So let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen from Glenn Greenwald, who did a very good report here, which is that the ACLU, prior to COVID, denounced mandates and coercive measures to fight pandemics. Now, in a New York Times op-ed, they have completely reversed their view. So let's go back and look exactly at what the ACLU had previously talked about. Now, what they had said is that pandemic preparedness, the need for public health, not a law enforcement national security approach. Now, to go back and read this, not that long ago, in 2008, the group explained its purpose this way, quote, "The report examines the relationship between civil liberties and public health in contemporary U.S. pandemic planning. Its key warning, quote, not all public health interventions have been benign or beneficial. However, too often, fears aroused by disease and epidemics have encouraged abuses of state power. Atrocities, large and small, have been committed in the name of protecting public health." And what they specifically point to is that coercion and brute force are rarely necessary. In fact, they are generally counterproductive. So back in 2008, they were specifically against law enforcement mandates, especially for vaccines and other coercive measures. Then in 2015, they reiterated the exact same thing. What happened in 2015? Well, what ended up happening is that right after that, they came out and Donald Trump won the presidency, and they raised over $1 billion from a bunch of liberals around the travel ban or whatever, and they had to turn into Democratic Party apparatchiks.
They also, I think, had, and this is again, something Glenn's been great on reporting this transition, there was a real kind of crisis and meltdown within the organization after Charlottesville.
Yeah, oh, that's
because
right.
they
That was
defended
another
the
big one.
right of those white supremacist protesters to be there. And so that triggered a real sort of rethink within the organization. But that defense of their free speech rights, as abhorrent as their views may be, has a long history within the ACLU. I mean, this is where they really made their name.
Skokie, right? Skokie, Illinois, the white nationalist rally that they defended and went to bat for. I think it was even a Jewish lawyer who made it so that they could march in a town full of Holocaust survivors.
That is correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
That's important.
And so, I mean, here's the thing. Glenn really got him dead to rights here.
Yeah, he did.
Like, there's just a total flip-flop. Now they're writing the op-ed saying that vaccine mandates are not an infringement of civil liberties.
Let's put it up there. Yeah.
Here's what they're saying now. Far from compromising them, vaccine mandates actually further civil liberties. They protect the most vulnerable, people with disabilities and fragile immune systems, children too young to be vaccinated, and communities of color hit hard by the disease. Now, you all know I'm in favor of vaccine mandates in some instances. I think if you're a teacher, you should be vaccinated. I think if you're a nurse, especially if you work in a nursing home, you should be vaccinated. I think our servicemen and women who are serving here and over the seas, it's a readiness issue. They've already signed up with given their bodies to the U.S. federal government in a lot of senses. I think they should also be vaccinated. But I expect the ACLU to be taking positions on these issues in favor of civil liberties that make me uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's right.
Their historic positioning.
Right.
That's their whole job, is to be kind of radicals on the issues of civil liberties. So now they're saying, yes, vaccine mandates basically in any instance. And just, not so long ago, total opposite take on on the very same issue on pandemics and state control and vaccine mandates. And they're right to be fearful. They were right originally to be fearful of the way that once a state gets a certain amount of control or a certain power, that they never relinquish it. That's something we talked about from the beginning of the pandemic. We talked to Glenn about it from the beginning of the pandemic, that, look, certain things are necessary in an emergency. Certain things are justified in an emergency that don't happen in normal times. But just look at 9/11 and the way that, everybody was freaked out and there was all this fear porn on the news, and it convinced people that we should give up all of these civil rights and liberties. We should allow government to have mass surveillance. We should allow these drone strikes to go on without any real due process. We should allow people to be held indefinitely forever in Guantanamo Bay. We should go to war with, no justification or even a pretense of a justification. So the fear of all of this is that once you hand those powers to the state, they don't relinquish it. That is a very good thing to fear and has a lot of historic justification. The ACLU used to understand that. They wrote in that original piece, if that fear justifies the suspension of liberties and the institution of an emergency state, then freedom and the rule of law will be permanently suspended. Those were their fears then. Now, singing a totally different tune with no real explanation of why things are different now than they were then.
They're not different. And actually, Glenn even found another example from May of 2020, so barely a year ago, where they were against immunity passports, in terms of vaccines. Why? Because they said the division would likely worsen existing racial, disability, and economic disparities in America and lead people struggling to afford basic necessities to deliberately risk their health. I completely agree with the past ACLU. The beclowning really of this organization is very sad to see.
It's sad.
Because they were, righteous fighters on sometimes unpopular causes, which, standing the test of time, as uncomfortable as it may be, we should go back and say that it was probably a good thing that people have a right to assemble and to march, even if they are some of the most despicable people on earth. They are the United States citizens. That really is kind of what the country is all about. And if you go and you look, as you're saying, with the mandates, which are now being really pushed and embraced by the Biden administration, the Biden administration sees it as their last resort. They're like, look, we did everything we possibly could, which I actually disagree with, given the fact that you did that great monologue on all of these public health contractors who gobbled up all of this government money, and who were very ineffectual at actually pushing for vaccination campaigns. I don't think they have done nearly what they should in terms of getting people to really do it. And if they really were for it, they should call Trump right now and ask him to cut a PSA. If he denies it, that's a story and they can blame him. I don't think he could deny it. I think he would have to film one. Some sort of national PSA that would run everywhere asking, yes, he's an egomaniac and he would need Biden to ask him. Biden should ask him in the interest of public health. These are exactly the type of things where I think that they absolutely have not done everything they can and are now moving towards the stick approach, encouraging more people in the private sector after the full authorization of the Pfizer vaccine to go ahead and institute more mandates. And look, maybe it'll work, but here's the thing. Where's the line? Dr. Fauci, January 21st, 2021, said 85% of Americans, adults, should be vaccinated for there to be herd immunity. We're almost past 70% in terms of the one dose figure. So what is it? I mean, nobody really seems to know. And that's the bigger problem. There's just muddy messaging on this all around.
The issue with herd immunity is that while you have overall 75% of adults now have received a single dose, you have pockets, obviously, where it's much, much lower.
Correct.
And so while you have a national number that's been reached in individual areas, you're nowhere close to herd immunity, which is why you're having these horrendous outbreaks. But just to show you how ugly things can get when you justify anything in the name of pandemic protections, it's a really crazy story out of South Korea. The president, let's throw this tear sheet up on the screen. President of a million-member Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, kind of a more militant trade union group, was arrested in a pre-dawn raid of his Seoul office where he had taken flight from threats of an arrest on September 2nd. Hundreds of police encircled the building for this union leader. As officers pried open the door, a local court had issued an arrest warrant for Yang after prosecutors alleged he had violated COVID social distancing laws by organizing a rally in downtown Seoul. His group had organized that rally on July 3rd, calling on the government to address inequality deepened by the pandemic. Government did not permit the rally, citing super spreader concerns. Even with the government not sanctioning the rally, about 8,000 union members gathered, carefully following government guidelines for social distancing. After the rally, 3 people tested positive for COVID, and there is zero evidence that they got it at that event, meaning they probably had it beforehand. They showed up at the event. There's no indication that there was any COVID spread at this event. What we've learned at this point is that, look, it's not that there's zero risk outside, but there's pretty low risk outside if you're doing a rally outside. They arrested this guy and threw him in jail. They're still calling for a general strike, by the way, on October 20th. Good for them. And upon arrest, Yang began a hunger strike calling for his release. So listen, different country, wildly different approach. But this is the type of slippery slope that you get on when you start to think that any state intervention is justified to stem the tide, to stop the spread of COVID whatsoever. And so this is extraordinarily dystopian, and frankly, it's what some people in this country would like to see.
No, that's why we're highlighting this, because they would like to see this. And it's a good example of how once you have it, they're not going to take it away, and they will use it to justify the policies that they then want. And that is exactly what we all want to avoid, which is union busting in the guise of COVID.
Yeah.
You can imagine it right here at home.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Right. I mean,
absolutely.
Remember, what was his name? The Amazon worker, Christian Smalls. They did the same thing. They were like, oh, you violated some fake COVID guidelines, so you're fired. And it was because he was organizing for a union. It was like,
Very true.
there you go. It's already happened here, people. And they're going to try and do it at the private level, and eventually it'll get there to the public.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.